Well, good morning. My name is Greg Sizemore. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Construction Users Roundtable, and we want to thank you for joining us in this webinar. We're going to have a lot of good information coming your way in just a few minutes. This series of webinars entitled Construction in Crisis, a CURT Response, is designed to provide you, our CURT member and contractor associates, with information that allows you to become better, more well-informed, well-connected decision maker. There are three things that CURT provides, and only three things that we strive to provide to our members. And that is number one, perspective. Number two, experiences of owners and each other. That's the creative networking. And number three is resources. So this is one of those resourced videos. And we encourage you right now to make sure your microphone's muted, make sure your camera is disabled. We'll control that from here. And we'll get started here in short course. I want to also thank you, the CURT member. Be advised, the CURT offices are open, fully operational from 9 to 5 each day. Yes, our staff is working remotely throughout the city. Our phones are being directed to that staff person. We're answering emails and texts and inquiries from the website. If you'd like to find out more about what we can do for you, CURT.org is our website, or feel free to call Rana and Rob at the CURT office. They are on the phones every day with our members and others providing services to you. So if there's something remotely you think we can help you with, please reach out and let us try to be on your team for that. I want to invite you also to stay to the very end of this webinar. I have found, and this is number 5 in our series, I have found that so much of the rich information comes from the interactive Q&A session at the very end. In fact, if there's still a lot of keen interest, we may go past 12, but everything that we need to convey to you informationally will be provided to you before that noon hour. I want to direct your attention to the bottom of your screen. If you put your cursor over my image or over your computer, you should see a little box pop up at the bottom. That's our chat box. And the chat box is being monitored not only by our staff, but our presenters as well. Ask your questions there throughout the program, and we'll try to get those answered for you during our webinar. Now, here's what's happening after the webinar. By close of business today, each attendee, each registrant will receive an email that has the bios of each of our presenters, contact information for each of our presenters, all the slide discs for each of our presenters, advanced registration notice for the next events, as well as other resources. We're also recording this session. So if you'd like to have a copy of this to disperse throughout your organization, please let Rana or Rob or Palmer here at the office know that you'd like to have a recorded copy, and we'll be glad to send you one. Our next event is going to be next Tuesday, where we have Cynthia Sal, who's going to be talking to us about leveraging lean and how to use lean on capital projects during COVID-19. How does it shake up how we do lean projects? That's next Tuesday. We're only planning out a week at a time, and the reason for that is we're in a very dynamic, very fluid situation, as you all well know, and we reserve the right to kind of butt in with special information and making sure that we're following developments as they unfold. I want to thank you again so much. Thank you, NCC, our sponsor, for helping make this webinar possible. We're very grateful for that. So make sure your mic is muted. Make sure your video cam is disabled. And at this time, I'm very happy to turn the screen and the microphone over to the first of our 3 speakers, Chris Dummermuth. We also have Bill Lewis joining from Sabic Corporation, and Art Lemper from Merck. Chris Dummermuth is also from Merck, and I think, Chris, you're going to lead off. So without further ado, Chris Dummermuth.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to be sharing my screen here, and I'll put it in presentation mode so everybody can see it. There we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that I've been working on for the past 2 years, and it's amazing. We were going full bore, but the COVID-19 really changed how we had to go ahead and look at finishing the project. So in the end, when you look at the footprint of this job, it was about 900 million, but we had labor from 25 different countries. We had material being shipped from over 40 countries. And when you go ahead and look at the footprint, we were truly an international project. So we had to go ahead and really shift gears when we went to the COVID-19 to go ahead and look at deliveries, look at the site, look at the individuals. But overall, what we wanted to do was put the message out there that your safety is paramount. We were never going to compromise that. So in the end, I'm going to go through some things that we put as far as mitigation measures for doing an international project. Again, a quick introduction. The COVID-19 crisis continues to escalate. This is not over. And I know that in the end, we want it to be over, but I know we still have to go ahead and keep in our minds, what can we do to even be better? And, you know, if we talk about current measures, but I will say this, there's probably going to be more measures as you keep going through this whole COVID-19 scenario. So in the end, keep that message pertinent that you really, really have to go ahead and make sure everybody's safety is the most important thing that they are talking about. So we put this introduction out there for people to see. We had 8 different pieces, and Art Lemper's going to be talking on the last 3, but we had a policy for entering a site. How do you make sure the right people are entering your site? Social distancing. How do you go ahead and make sure that people keep that on their mind? A notification procedure if you have a suspected or a confirmed case of COVID-19. You've got to have that in your back pocket to know what to do if you have a suspected case or confirmed case. Travel requirements, people coming into the country, who's going to be allowed on site. Cleaning requirements, what's the regime? How do you go ahead and make the cleaning, you know, so much more now that you've got the virus there, you know, to deal with. Permit to work requirements. How does that change? You know, I mean, we went from going ahead and handing permits to each other to going ahead and having a place where people just came in and signed. Visitor guidance, and then also communications. So a quick policy for entering the site. We had 4 questions that we wanted to go ahead and make sure that we asked everybody before they came into the site. And we ended up with 6 security guards at the gate asking these questions. But basically, we want to know if anybody had been at an at-risk country, has a person traveled outside of Ireland, and that could be whatever country you're in. Has the person been in contact with a confirmed COVID-19 case or suspect that they may have been, or are you currently suffering from a COVID-19 symptoms? And if the answer was yes, we asked them to not access the site and go talk immediately to their direct manager, and also to go ahead and follow the current HSE guidelines. So we had a strict policy on whether people are coming to the site. We did rely on them being honest at the gate, but in the end, we did do our best to make sure that anybody who came on the site had actually had a screening. So social distancing, when you go and look at social distancing, you go ahead and you have to keep that non-essential face-to-face meetings have to be canceled. You know, we didn't want any face-to-face meetings to exceed 15 minutes. So meetings had to be very, very, very short. We wanted to go ahead and make sure they were concise. Whiteboard meetings had to be reduced. Toolbox talks, we suspended toolbox talks to go ahead and make sure we didn't have groups of people. Site signage was good. In the canteens, office and meeting areas, and also in the construction and commissioning areas. Lots of times there was little huddles going on, and we wanted to make sure those huddles, we kept everybody that 2 meters apart. And in the end, a picture down there at the right goes ahead and shows you what it looked like talking to people as they came into the site, asking them the questions. A few more social distancing requirements. Canteen times, we moved contractors around to make sure we didn't overload the canteen. We had a security guard there to make sure that we kept people out of the canteen if they were overloaded. All those at a desk, we asked people to eat at their desks to go ahead and make sure we didn't have any of that social contact. And then also too, we had wipes put everywhere for sanitization. And we looked at the office areas. We moved people around in the offices. A couple a couple things that we did was we had 2 mannequins put at the beginning of the site, right at the turnstiles, with a 2-meter radius to make sure people knew what that distance really looked like. And the other thing you can see in the canteen, we spaced everybody out to make sure we maintain that 2-meter distance in the canteens. A quick notification procedure. Again, we wanted reporting to be, that day. If we had a suspect case, we wanted to make sure we had the contact list, make sure that we went ahead and we contacted the contact people. And then if we had a confirmed case, we also wanted to make sure that communication was robust. So I'm not going to go through everything here, but this gives you a way of looking at it to make sure that you had the restricted movements, people knew what to do if they were a suspect case or in contact with a suspect case. The travel requirements, again, arriving from Ireland from another country. If you did not have symptoms of coronavirus, we still wanted you to go ahead and have 14 days, away from the site. And then also traveling to another country from Ireland, we didn't want anybody to travel if they didn't have to. So again, all of these things, the travel requirements, we wanted to make sure people understood. And I want to make one thing really clear too. We followed the country's guidelines. The HSE of Ireland did a great job of going ahead and giving us the guidelines. Did they change over the past month? The answer is yes. As we got more and more cases, the government came up with different restrictions and we followed them all. So we wanted to make sure that people understood we were going to follow the HSE guidance, their safety was paramount, and we were going to do everything we could to go ahead and make sure we kept people safe. Cleaning requirements, we had some do's, we posted signage up, and we had some don'ts about not touching your eyes, don't shake hands, don't share objects that touch your mouth. We had, like I said, the site signage was all over the site with these do's and don'ts. Enhanced cleaning, we did enhanced cleaning, at the end of the day and also between lunch sittings, and also too on the weekends we did even more cleaning. And we really talked to people about spitting and different things like that. During this, you couldn't have people doing that. And we really did go ahead and want people to understand this was serious business. You can't keep doing things the way you normally do them. And I'm going to turn it over to Art to talk about permit to work requirements. Art, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. Thanks, Chris. And good morning, everyone. And back to what Chris was saying, I mean, we basically worked this on a global basis. So we had to understand, I guess Merck is a global company. We had to understand all the local in-country requirements, as things were evolving. So our entire global team, both project management and safety, met weekly to basically download, what's going on in each country we're working in, share, best practices, any lessons learned, and basically disseminate that back to everyone, on our team, on all our projects, and then back to our construction management firms and also to our contractors. So this was obviously a very dynamic situation, as it still is. And for me, the best thing is, right, you can't communicate more, right? You just have to communicate, keep talking about it. And again, I think that's how our program developed overall, not only with this project that Chris was involved with and was managing, but all of our projects, from very large ones like this one to some of our smaller projects around the globe. So as Chris was talking about the permit to work requirements, again, this was something that we had to address on this project as well as others, but you can see that they actually modified it to enhance social distancing and support, right, improved hygiene in relation to the manual handling of the paper documentation itself. And again, so they revised the process, got it out to everybody, continued to communicate that, worked with our permit coordinators, and also the permit to work meetings, again, were relocated to the canteen facility, again, for social distancing requirements. And we do this very similarly all over the world. So we either do it in canteens where we could keep folks separated, 6 foot or 1.8 meters apart, to, doing it outside and doing the same thing. If we had to because obviously we were pulling in more than 10 people. So any area that we could get that was large enough to do it and or outside, seemed to work well for us. And that way we'd be able to monitor, social distancing between everyone. Also, additional hand sanitizers. This was another thing that Chris did a great job on his project, and we also did worldwide. We felt like you couldn't have enough of them right at the permit to work meetings to out on the job site. And then also our package and C&Q leads on Chris's project actually verbally confirmed with the permit to work coordinator that they were satisfied with the permits assigned during the meeting, again, and also signed by the permit to work coordinator on their behalf. So I think this went really well. A lot of good lessons learned from this, Chris. If you want to go to the next slide. So also a site visitor program, and we also launched this globally, again, in the US, to all the different countries we're working in the EMEA and also Asia Pacific. So again, a visitor, right, has to basically, it requires a 72-hour notice of all visitors on site. Applications for visiting have to be supported by the jurisdiction that meetings are for business critical purposes, and there has to be an approval made. And actually, all of our sites globally have been doing this to where if anybody from outside, there's not a regular on-site person that's coming to the site, whether it be a vendor, engineering company, or even our own employees from another site, basically have to get on a list and be approved by the plant management. Business critical means, right, that the visitor is required to support a project critical path to future product delivery, right? So, I mean, again, we're trying to make sure that, Merck's supply chain is not interrupted by the COVID-19. We continue to make the drugs, make sure that, from Merck to the drugstores to the patient, that supply line is continued without interruption. And so again, associated with, things like regulatory compliance, potential visitors had to consider if the contact, right, with the site can be made virtually rather than in person. So there's a lot of great stuff that's been going on. We've been doing, using iPads, having virtual meetings where people are walking down areas, doing C&Q activities, doing, safety walk downs, all kinds of things you can do virtually. And basically, the team would be calling in even from home or from an isolated office to participate in these things whilst one person is out in the field walking things down, basically, videoing them, in an actual meeting. So communications, again, the senior management team and each site had an emergency team, just like on Chris's project, basically took place daily. And then also project-wide communications daily to keep people informed, especially with the extended site team. Project teams were also encouraged to communicate regularly utilizing Skype, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, or similar tools, right? Face-to-face meetings may take place again, but where we're requiring social distancing. Also site signage. We really, we got a lot of the signage and posters from the CDC, World Health Organization. All that stuff is free. A lot of the stuff was made up on our different sites. The Dublin site did a fantastic job of really getting that message out there, right? So making sure, people understood the risk mitigation measures, social distancing, hand washing, sanitizing, all those things. And we felt like you couldn't communicate that enough. Also, the site mobile phone policy actually was adapted to facilitate commissioning and qualification, like I was just talking about, to use their mobile phones. Because we actually have a mobile phone policy that you have to go to a safe zone to actually use your phone. For C&Q personnel, right, mobile phone use was permitted, right, for business critical communication requirements, and also the use of mobile phone was also documented on the SPA, the Safe Plan of Action, with associated risk of slips, trips, and falls, making sure you're, in the moment and paying attention to what you're doing and not walking, and looking at the phone. Next slide, Chris. All right, then there's just some attachments and links here, some handy stuff. Chris, you want to talk about any of these real quick?
Yeah, just a visitor questionnaire. We wanted to go ahead and have a questionnaire filled out before the people came to site to make sure that we had all their information, knew what they were coming for, and made sure it was business critical. So this was a document that we basically knew exactly who was coming, when they were coming, And before they got to the site, we were able to go ahead and make sure that they had to be on site before they got there. Country guidance, I just gave you a link on the HSE for Ireland. It's a sample just like every other country would have. And then also management of suspected case of COVID-19. This is a document that allows you to keep contact lists. It allows you to go ahead and document when you have a suspect case or when you have a confirmed case. So it's just some links. So if you, when you get the presentation, you can click on it and open it and see exactly what these documents look like. Okay. Bill, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me all right? And I think I need to take the screen here now. So I've been involved in my career in multiple shutdowns globally.
Let's try to call Matt Smith. I clicked wrong.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Let me interrupt just a moment. Greg Sizemore here. Everyone who's
Okay.
participating, we have quite a crowd. Can you please make sure your microphone is muted? Go ahead, Bill.
Okay. So as I mentioned, I've been involved, throughout my career in multiple shutdowns for various reasons, globally. And I just want to share some considerations and kind of go through some lessons learned, with you. One of the first things, what's driving the slowdown? Multiple reasons. What's the project criticality and type? What kind of contract obligations and terms do we have? Where are your engineering design and deliverables? What are you going to do with your people? What's your project control process and how well do you know where you are? Sequential turnover and lockout, material receiving, warehouse inspection, preservation, storage requirements, temporary construction facilities, and most important, what's your restart strategy? Okay. Okay, what's driving the slowdown? It could be weather, political strife, economics, some type of pending threat like we're now seeing with this pandemic event, or just some other, company specific reason that you're wanting to slow things down. I think here, I live here in Houston and in the Gulf Coast, we have a lot of weather shutdowns. We get the storms, the hurricanes, the tornadoes. I lived up north. We had a lot of issues with, the cold weather, with the snow and freezing temperatures, freezing up parts of our plants. So, there could be a lot of things that's driving the slowdown. One of the important things, you need to build a good steering team for this to manage this crisis. And typically, depending on the area, if I was in Europe, Asia, Latin America, Southeast, or South America, we have different teams because there will be a little bit of variation. And you need to have a strong project manager. This is going to be the team leader. He's got oversight. He's going to have connection to all the business. You need to have representative for engineering, procurement, construction, operations, maintenance, security, your environmental health, safety, and security, and your quality groups. Project criticality, what I've typically learned is we defined it as, economic projects and non-economic projects. With the economic projects, that's usually growth or improvement, just expansion. Typically, those are a lot easier to slow down. Sometimes you get in a good case where you're in a potentially sold out market. So it's important to continue with those projects. Now, the non-economic projects, replacement in kind, maintenance, uptime, safety, environmental, regulatory, here again, a lot of these are going to require you to continue. For example, safety and economics, may need to continue because, we have some strict completion timelines in force that we need to meet. Contractual obligations, I guess the first thing here is what's my communication plan to the team? Some things I need to consider. It needs to be a very resilient. It needs to be all inclusive. I need to make sure I include all my stakeholders, and this is everyone from my businesses down to my smallest subcontractor. And my communication plan, I say standardize. It needs to be repeatable. I need to have an agenda. I need to set it up for the same time every day. Right now, we're going through For the last probably 6 weeks, we have a meeting every day, and that's to keep everybody engaged. What contracts and purchase orders are in progress. I probably have design contracts going. Where's a logical stopping point, that will report or support a future state. When I start back up, I need to have myself in a good position. Procurement, I need to consider what vendors I have engaged, and what procurement contracts are out there, where my regret cost is. Support services, material, equipment rentals, cleaning services for my TC facilities. I need to take all those into consideration. Bulk material status and shipping logistics. A lot of these projects are big projects, and there's a lot of stuff already in many phases. And then my labor supply, depending on whether I'm using labor suppliers or how I'm getting my labor, subcontractors, whatever. I just need to have a good understanding of what are my commitments, my obligation, and what's the terms of all the contracts. Okay, I talk about engineering and design deliverables. Where is my engineering in terms of completeness? Are we looking at a complete shutdown, a partial shutdown, or does engineering continue? Equipment specification, vendor reviews, resilient document control process. I find in all these shutdowns, we seem to get to the point where we want to shut things down, and we start looking at our document control process, and we have a lot of challenges there. Design tools, future state, 3D model estimating. We have a lot of software we use, and we need to make sure that we have that in a good position when we shut it down, and a good turnover process.
Bill,
Yeah.
this is Greg Sizemore. Can I interrupt you for just a moment? Are these engineering and design deliverables that you're enumerating here, were these in place prior to the pandemic, or were these things that you've learned as a result of the pandemic? And are you encouraging our owners who are on the call to use this list of a dozen, the dirty dozen, I guess, to use as they create their crisis management team?
Yeah, I think these are considerations you have to have. Hopefully, a lot of these things are in place, and it's just a matter of rethinking and understanding where you are and positioning yourself. Okay, still there?
Yeah, we're still here. Everybody, please mute your line. Thank you. Go ahead, Bill.
It's just looking at these and make sure that you are positioned for success when the restart up starts. Okay. Does that answer, Greg, you think? Or
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And the detailed design is another thing. Typically, that's not done by your ENHO or your EPC contractor. That's passed off down to the vendor or the fabricator. So make sure you think about where all that detailing is in process. Procurement, open equipment, bulk material specifications, logistics, and field support. As we said, the big projects, and I think Chris mentioned it earlier, you have 40 countries supplying material. Where is it on a ship? And where is it? So there's things you have to consider. People placement, the current, project staff, planned direct and indirects. What are you going to do with your people? You're going to be shuffling them around. You're going to put people in places. You're going to have reduction in force. Some of the things to consider, don't overreact. Don't panic too much. Step back, get your plan together. You want to maintain a core, and you want to position yourself for a smooth startup. You're going to go through this. We're all going to get through this crisis like every other crisis, and you want to be positioned for success when you start back up. You want to have the vibrant communication plan to all your people, subcontractors, your labor suppliers. Make sure you're in good contact with them. Have them included in your plan. Redistribution of the workload. One of the things I noticed with these, we'd have a reduction in force, and it may not have always been good to be the one person that was left, because all the paper for those other people's desks usually ended up on yours. So your workload went 2 to 3x. So something to consider. Activities continuing. These are very time consuming, people dependent. Closing out contracts or at least bringing them to a good state. Engineering support, still going to be doing some things to close out. Surveillance of the shutdown, subcontractor, labor suppliers, turnover of facilities, and security. One of the things I've noticed on these is when you shut them down and you have everything stored, material in storage typically is open for cannibalization. And, you know, you can understand an operating plant, a valve goes bad, just happens to be one out there on that project. Let's go get that one for now. We'll replace it later, which doesn't always happen that easy. But anyway, project controls, physical progress. Where is the project? You know, engineering completeness, preliminary, detailed design, construction release, as-built. You know, close out for ease of restart and make sure it's well documented. You know, here's just a little bit of the files. You know, I find my model files, the IDF files from the model, you know, those need to be secured in the proper state. You know, drawing schedules, engineering equipment lists, you know, purchase orders, IFC drawings, understand where you are in the issue process. And then that same way with construction construction completeness, you know, what is complete and validated, etc. Hopefully you have, you know, a great working process in place before the crisis that makes it a lot easier. But typically, you know, it's not going to be accepted until it goes through the whole validation and acceptance process, and our quality department signs off on it. One of the things, you know, to think about, is there any part of the project that can be safely turned over that, you know, that benefits the operation? A lot of times, part of the project, you can have a partial completion and turn it over and it'll benefit. You know, with that case, you need to consider mechanical walk downs and readiness to operate, you know, getting it to a safe state, you know, lockout plans, simple or complex. You know, a lot of times you have many lockouts through a operating facility, and you need to go back and restructure that and re-lock out everything. You know, things to consider: locks, you know, tags, pancakes, blind, physical disconnects. I've had cases where we've had a test blind in and the insulator came by and insulated it, and we thought it was a restricting orifice. Turned out that, you know, when we tried to start the plant up, we couldn't start it up until we had to go back and find that thing. So the other thing, when everybody leaves the site, make sure you know who has the authority to remove locks. So turnover documentation, dossier, you know, operating and maintenance manuals, temporary tie-ins and material type, pre-startup safety reviews and material and equipment records populated in the maintenance software. If you use SAP, it normally, if you use the maintenance module, you want to have all that stuff documented in there. And maintenance schedule and develop a baseline. Material receiving. So here again, we talked about material being everywhere. Think about what the schedule of deliveries, you know, what types of material, equipment, how you're going to receive it, offload. You may need to bring a crane in to offload things. We had some issues with some of our sites recently where we had ship deliveries, and when we went into this COVID-19, they wouldn't let the ships port. So we had materials so we ended up having to go back to the customs and work out, you know, methods to get the ships ported so we could offload equipment. Quality inwards good receiving procedure, you know, all the inspection, storage, have a good grid system for things like, you know, pipe laydown yards, you know, any temporary warehousing, you know, if you do, you know, what condition is in, how long was it built to stay there, wind loads, snow loads, preservation and special storage requirement. And in some cases, you're going to have a, you know, a maintenance organization that goes out and, you know, rotates motors, turns polymer shafts, make sure you have humidity control, but there's a lot of different, and you know, that's the interim maintenance part of it. And also when they're doing this maintenance, a lot of this has to be recorded and documented. So temporary facilities, you know, this is all the construction facilities that you typically have, all your offices, your temporary ones, your permanent, you know, cafeterias, warehouses. You got IT infrastructure to think about, you know, break areas, toilet facilities, pest control, vehicles, equipment, lay down yards, you know, weather protection for different things, you know, and what utilities are required to maintain the assets for the shutdown period, no matter how long it is. And, you know, you have minimum security checks that you're going to have, you know, you can have water leaks, we can have water lines freeze. We've actually had cases where squirrels got in and ate water lines in half, and then we've had electrical equipment short out and stuff. So a lot of things you need to consider there. And then, you know, your restart strategy. So when you're starting the shutdown, you need to start with the end in mind. Where you want to be next month or next year, or if it lasts a couple years, you know, actually had projects that we shut down that were down for a couple of years. You know, so think about where you want to be. You know, look at your core team and how you're going to remobilize. So hopefully you've kept that core team, you know, together, and validate the current state. Once you come back in, where are you with your preservation plan and all your documentation, all quality inspections? You have to bring people in. You know, the other thing, if it's been a 2 or 3 year shutdown, you need to go back and look at your budget. Your estimate, the cost has probably changed quite a lot. Schedule, project scope, contracting strategy. You may have had this thing shut down long enough that you've got to redo everything, different contractors. Document control, safety method statements, vendor and contractor, timing to re-engage, preparation, and estimate to complete. So that's something that you'll definitely want to look at to make sure you got it together. And that's pretty much all I had. And I think I'll turn it back over to you, Greg, if we have any questions.
Yes, we do have several questions. And first of all, I know you guys have a ton to do, as we all do, and I want to thank you for taking time to resource us. For those of you who are joined late, be advised that we're recording this session, and sometime before close of business today, you'll receive a follow-up email that'll have the biodata sheets, connection information for the presenters, their full slide deck. And if you want a recording, you can request it and disseminate it throughout your organization. So I want to thank Chris and Bill and Art for joining us. Now we get to one of the more interesting parts of the presentation, and that's the interactive part. So I invite you, if you have a question, to put it in the chat box. Your chat box can be found just below. If you'll tap your screen, move your cursor, there should be a box that pops up, and you'll see a little chat box there for questions, and I've also got them coming in from other sources. So one of the first questions, and let me help moderate the Q&A session, is did you folks take, or did any of you all take temperatures of those who were coming in, and was this at an operational site or a greenfield install? Temperature testing is a big deal, I think, in the ascertaining whether or not a person is possibly symptomatic. Thoughts on use of temperature testing?
Hey, Greg, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, just real quick. In Dublin, we did, but it was only for about a week before the site ended up getting shut down. But we trained our security forces to go ahead and do that along, and that went along with the HSE guidelines. But we had a certified nurse come out and train the security guards. But we did check temperatures. We didn't really find anything that was really a problem, because most of the people knew that if they, had those symptoms, they wanted to stay home anyway. So it's a good check. It's, to me, it worked out fine, and everybody had the option of refusing if they wanted to.
So I have a little bit a different experience. I've been spending most of my time in a modular yard, and we have 4,400 direct people coming in and out of the gates. And one of the agreements with the government before we were allowed to start the modular yard back up is we had to do temperature checks at the gate every morning. So we started out with the handhelds, and we had a group of from our safety and our HSE department out there actually measuring temperatures, and it just turned out to be overwhelming. So we ended up going out and getting cameras and putting the cameras there to monitor people's temperature as they came through the gate.
Great resource. Another question is, you mentioned sanitizing the sites, sanitizing where people gather. That's a daunting task. Are you running into challenges getting the necessary sanitizing supplies, wipes, hand sanitizers, and such? And do you have any recommendations? How have you gone about creatively to acquire those supplies?
I'll start off with it. This is Art. One of the things we did, we actually referenced on the global requirements we sent out, again, because many places were experiencing shortages of these materials. But the CDC website actually does a really good job. They actually give you several different formulas of how to make it yourself. Obviously, with chlorine, and other things that you can actually develop. Make this stuff yourself to sanitize specific areas when you can't find the hand wipes and things like that. And you know what? Back to soap and water was always our plan B, right? If you don't have enough sanitizer, then we had to put in additional wash stations with basically soap and water,
Yeah, I think being creative is an important element here. Here at the office, we ran into trouble here in Cincinnati acquiring these things, and knowing we had to come into the office. Palmer's wife is a chemist, works for one of the big chemical organizations here, and she made us a batch, I guess, of 30 bottles of hand sanitizer. So it can be done in creative ways. Anyone else want to weigh in onto the acquiring sanitation supplies for the site? Okay, so Rob Wagner of Procter & Gamble says, hey, how did you expedite critical materials prior to shutdown? And how soon did you get started? When in this journey from the outbreak in China to where we are today, did you realize it was an issue, this was going to be an emergency, and you started to expedite the acquisition of critical materials? Someone want to weigh in on that, please?
Yeah, this is Bill Lewis. We actually started at about the end of January. We kind of seen the crisis coming or expected. I think it was actually worse than we thought. We started looking at all our material suppliers and vendors, looking at all our logistics and shipping schedules and timelines and companies, and tried to reinforce that, if it got worse, that we had a strategy in place. One of the things that we didn't, I think, take to enough of a detail is the customs part of it, where we had things coming in for other countries. We had some things locked up in the ports, which took a lot more, I guess, cooperation and alignment with the government and regulatory bodies to get it through customs and get it to the site.
Other comments on point? A question has emerged. Can you get a link to the camera that you referenced earlier that monitors the body temperatures? Where did you get them? Can you give us a resource in that? If the answer is yes, we'll just work with Palmer and Kyle and the presenters to make sure that you get that link as you in our follow-up email that'll go out to every registrant. So number one, can we get a link to the site from where you purchased the camera monitors?
Yeah. Let me see what I can find out. I'm not sure exactly where they bought them, but it's the same type of camera that you'll see if you fly internationally. You go into a lot of countries. When you come off the plane, you walk through. They'll have a sanitation mat, and a lot of Asian countries have them. And I guess it's reflective of their previous SARS experience, but the same type of camera. But I'll get you a link for that.
Great, thanks. And so referencing that cameras for body temperature, how accurate was the reading? Did you have any faux pas or snafus on the use of the cameras on site instead of human beings and monitors?
I'm unaware of any issues. I think, the monitor actually shows like it's an infrared camera. It shows the collar of the body temperature. So if they had somebody that was running a high temperature, I think the accuracy would have to be down to 1/10 of a degree Fahrenheit, but I'd have to follow up on that.
Thanks. Any other comments on it? A question coming in from another source is, it sounds like an outstanding effort that you made. How involved was your legal department in establishing this reasonable care standard? Or were they involved at all?
I can go ahead and take that. We had HR and legal both involved in Ireland, and we had to, because in the end we wanted to make sure we were right in compliance with what the HSE was going to go ahead and document for us. You just have to go ahead and keep them in the loop. We had a daily meeting, and HR and also legal attended that daily meeting that we had for the Dublin site. So in the end, we did get them involved. They guided us. They told us what we could do, what we couldn't do. And, basically in the end, we came up with a plan that everybody was satisfied with.
Have any of you, go ahead, Art.
No, I was just going to say, and globally, that was pretty much our approach as well. So basically, I sat in with our leadership team in a daily meeting that we've been having for going on 4 weeks now. And then basically all this information was disseminated right corporately, down to the different groups, whether you were in manufacturing or for GES, it's, our construction group, engineering construction group. So, trying to keep things consistent. But then the one thing, because we work in so many different countries, basically we would always defer back to any site regulations, especially if they were more rigorous, right, than the corporate, because, you know, there could be a difference in country regulations, local regulations as well. So we wanted to make sure that we were following the local, regional, or in-country regulations.
That's a great tee up for the next question that's coming from another source, and that's internationally speaking or domestically speaking, where are your troubled areas? Where are you finding challenges and why? So some countries do it better than others and communicate better than others. We've heard commentary on the news media, from the news media about that. Are you folks experiencing particular areas in your portfolio of projects that are just troubling and bothersome, and where are those, and what's the issue?
I think overall, everybody has been doing a good job. I mean, regulatory wise, I mean, obviously China was obviously very difficult, right? And they still have an edict on anyone with an external passport basically cannot go back. So, and I know many of us are experiencing that issue, but I would say our contractors, for the most part, appreciate, you know, what we were doing. We did have some challenges, and Chris could talk a little bit about that on social distancing. We did have to monitor that. And again, you think about social distancing, you know, we're trying to say 6 feet away, 1.8 meters for no more than 15, you know, minutes. Well, construction takes a lot of, you know, team efforts, right? So a lot of time we've actually deferred projects. We've tried to come up with creative ways to work around some of these things. I'll let Chris talk to more of the specifics that they ran into.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Art.
Yeah, the one thing that we really ran into was we were more in that phase going from construction to commissioning. We had a lot of vendor reps that had to fly in from all kinds of different countries, because we had all of our vendors came from 40 different places, you know, as far as the project goes. So getting vendors to the site, and then also working with them that if you needed them to stay 3 weeks, they didn't leave to go home for the weekend. We paid extra to go ahead and keep them there so we could go ahead and get the whole systems commissioned. And in the end, you had to shift gears knowing how these people were going to operate too. We did have a couple people where their vendor reps were from China, were from South Korea, different places. And they were actually out of Canada, but their vendor reps came from different parts of the world too. So you really had to know where your vendor reps were coming, how you were going to go ahead and get them to the site, and then also keep them there to go ahead and get the commissioning done in one shot.
Thanks. If go ahead. Was there another comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, my experience too, and globally, is this has been an evergreen process, and it didn't matter whether it was in the U.S. or it was in Asia or Europe. Things were changing, so we had to be very adaptable to you know, keeping close ties and alignment with the local governments and regulatory bodies. We were chasing them all over the place sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's one of the other questions that arose here from another source, and that is, what sources, websites, or organizations are you following or monitoring in order to benchmark best practices for this thing?
I can answer that. And, you know, one of the companies we use for our contractor pre-qualification is Construct Secure. And I know they've been to many of our CURT meetings, but one of the things they have done is all the contractors that belong to Construct Secure, they actually set up a site on their website where basically any contractor, CM owner that wants to share their program, and I think they probably got 40 or 50 different companies that have actually shared their response plan to the COVID-19, which has been great. And then actually what Construct Secure did, they actually went through all of these different plans and pulled out like the best practices, best lessons learned, and then sent that out to all the subscribers. So that's been really good. Like my team, we continue to meet with all of our safety and project people across the globe weekly. We've got an hour-and-a-half meeting every Friday, and not only for our project status, you know, safety, we're talking about any issues with the COVID-19, best practices, lessons learned. Many of our groups are sharing what they're doing at their site with other sites across the globe. So that's also been very effective. Like I said, you know, communication and sharing, that's the best way, because you know what? All of us are a lot smarter than one of us, right?
Yeah.
100%. Go ahead.
And to be honest, we're all going to be a lot more prepared than we were for this one.
And I'm going to ask Rob and Rana to call and connect with our Construct Secure folks, and let's see if we can link them up to the current members as well. I think that's a marvelous service they're doing. And by the way, for those of you who joined us late, we're in the process of developing a construction and crisis special report. If you'd like to subscribe to that construction and crisis special report that we're developing, what it will have is not necessarily these webinars, but other resources that we're finding very valuable as we talk to our members around the country, and they're resourcing really that report for us. So if you'd like to get one of those reports, just contact Rob or Rana here at the Current office, or Palmer, any of us, and we can make sure you get registered for that. It was on the pre-webinar scroll shortly ago. And Greg Palmer, if you would put that link up on the chat box, take a moment and put that link up on the chat box for the construction and crisis special report, then that would make sure everybody gets it as well. There's another couple questions, some related to this temperature testing, and that is, what do you do if somebody refuses a temperature, and have you had that? I can't imagine. And were they allowed entry? Any comments on special exceptions on that point?
You know, we had a no exception rule. We actually, in the site I'm with, the government monitored us, and, you know, and basically if we had any violation, they were going to shut us down. And they were very clear with that, so we couldn't have any exceptions.
Anyone else want to? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, and we didn't have anybody refuse. I think people understood the importance and the value, and they complied.
Yeah, that's what we found too, William. You know, I mean, basically, when you go ahead and look at it, we told people they had the right to refuse, but nobody did.
Great. There was another question, is that have you changed production targets on your capital projects due to this thing? And how are those decisions being filtered and analyzed?
I can give you an overview of what we had to do. Of course, you know, we lost a lot of man hours, so we had to go back and redo our whole execution strategy and planning, which actually turned out very good. So far we're not missing any of our shipment dates, and but it took a lot of work and a lot of planning, you know, in this slowdown period to, you know, position ourselves to come out a little bit better.
Yeah, I can just talk a little bit to some of the projects that we've been working on. We've had some where, you know, states have gone ahead and shut down certain pieces of construction. Those have been delayed, but the critical ones, we were able to go ahead and keep working, and pretty much we're staying on schedule with those right now on the critical ones. But the ones that weren't critical, we looked at it and we ended up going ahead and shutting some of those projects down. So they will be impacted.
Another question comes in. Did you experience any issues with your staff, your people, your team, your project team in regards to personal data protection? So, you know, we're putting a lot of information out there from and for a lot of people. What special precautions, if any, have legal or HR talked to you about in terms of personal data protection?
I'll take that one just real quick. We had 4 of us on the site who dealt with the close contact list for suspected cases and confirmed cases. One of them was an HR person, one of them was a plant manager, one of them was legal, and myself. And in the end, we didn't let any of that information out to anybody. So in the end, if they were contacted, it was one of the 4 of us that contacted the person. So it's a very tight group as far as who the individuals were. We did report to the site that we had two suspect cases a day, or 4, or whatever it was. But in the end, names and everything else like that, that was kept very, very, very confidential.
Any other comments on point? You also notice in the chat box that Greg Palmer has put up the link for you can go to subscribe to the Construction and Crisis Special Report. It'll be from Palmer. It's to everyone, and it's right there in the chat box. So copy that link, click on that link, and let us know that you want this. Another question that came in from another source is, did you develop your crisis management team in advance? Do they each have roles and responsibilities? And did you notice any gaps as you executed it during this pandemic? So the question is regarding what I'll call, or what they call, the crisis management team. Were there specific roles and responsibilities? Had it been prepared in advance? And as you've unfolded and executed on the plan, were there any gaps that you noticed that'll go back and make a better plan next time? Thoughts?
Yeah, this is Bill Lewis. We actually, we put our plan together, and with everything, it had to be evergreen. And as we started going through it, more and more stuff started to evolve, and we had to add more people. But we did, everybody had a role and responsibility. We had a clear agenda. We met daily, and it did expand. But I think we have a better guideline now for in the future for if we run into this. But there was some few things, especially with the COVID-19 crisis. When all the government and regulatory bodies got involved, it was pretty much outside of what we typically had done.
Yeah, that's a good point. And perhaps a future seminar, or maybe some resources, or a future webinar. I don't know how quickly we'll get back to the regular current schedule, but I think best practices in crisis management, given a pandemic or these unexpected issues that evolve, would be a terrific resource. Somebody else was about to weigh in.
Oh, yeah, this is Art again. I was just going to say, I mean, we had a, pandemic response plan. We already had one, but again, very much back to what Bill was saying. I mean, so much of this with the COVID-19, again, with everybody weighing in and everything changing constantly, I mean, we had a lot to do still. So, I mean, we did have a base plan, but there was still a lot of work to do. And what we did basically is, from every group within Merck, one person was assigned to be on the overall response team for COVID-19. So again, that message was clear all the way down. So they would meet basically with a broader team with our MLT, and then all that information would get disseminated basically daily and weekly down to all the other groups.
Yeah.
Terrific. Yeah, go ahead, Bill. I think that was you, maybe.
No, it was me, Chris.
Chris, go ahead.
We had a command center area set up for the site and everything else like that. So the way that it worked out is, were we prepared for the pandemic? I would agree with Art and Bill. There was things that we had to really shift gears for, but the foundational part of having a command central place on the site was in place, and it helped us going ahead and get a leg up on getting on top of this pandemic.
Great, thanks. We mentioned in our prior conference, our teleconference prior to the webinar, that Merck was willing to make some additional resources available. Well, I think that just came in about 30 minutes before we started. Art, can you weigh in on what you're willing to share with fellow CURT members and registrants to this event?
Yes, I mean, we put together, Chris, myself, and others on our team put together basically a composite checklist for, basically suspending construction execution on a site. So basically a site closure checklist. Again, it's not inclusive of, but limited to kind of a statement, right? I mean, every project's different, but I would say we took a good stab at getting the basics for any project. And obviously, depending on the specifics of your project, you may need to add to this checklist. But it's, I would say it's probably a very good start. That was sent out globally to all of our projects this was prior to our project possibly having to shut down. Many of our low priority projects have already started to shut down. So very helpful, I think, to all of our folks, and we'd be happy to share that.
That's wonderful, and we appreciate that. And for others listening, if you have some resources that you feel would be germane to this issue, particularly crisis management teams or readiness to stop work, please send them in to Rob or Rana or Palmer, and we'll make sure that we get those out to everybody on this webinar. Another question came in from another source, and that is this. I think it was Art who said it, is that this work from home and this pandemic has created a magnitude of 3 times the effort and the work that we were doing a month ago. We've even experienced that here at CURT many times here till 7 and 8 o'clock at night with some of the key team members. How are you monitoring employee wellness, employee health, the emotional issues of those who are being called on to undertake a Herculean task? What are you doing for your own people? Any commentary on that one?
Sure. I think I'll kick that off and then let Chris and Bill weigh in. But one of the things we've done, we employ some health coaches as part of our safety team. So one of the things I did about probably 3 weeks ago, I started meeting with them and I said, look, we want to come up with something. This is very distracting, and not only for our folks on the construction site, but for our employees. And when you talk about emotional and mental distractions, I mean, this takes the cake, right? So not only looking at, how these distractions can affect you on the construction site, but also we developed, basically it's called a daily dose of wellness. So this goes out globally to not only our employees, but to all of our CMs and our contractors. And, I'd also be happy to share some of this, just some of the daily doses of wellness, but it's everything from thinking about, how you're basically taking care of yourself, right? How's your immune system? What are the things you can do to beef up your own immune system, right? Because, we don't want to feel helpless, but then there are things you can do around that, but also things dealing with the emotional side, with the mental side of it, even fun things for families to do with their kids, while everybody's cooped up in the house together. So it's a wide range of basically wellness tips and things you can do, quite a toolbox. Our team has really done a great job. They're sending these out daily globally.
And to that point, next Thursday, April the 9th, we're going to have a wellness strategies for your team. Wellness strategies during the current crisis. That'll be next Thursday, 11 o'clock as well. I see that we've reached the noon hour, and so I'm going to invite you, for those of you who had questions, if you'll just send those to one of the CURT team, Rana or Rob in particular, they'll make sure that they get you the answer that you're looking for. And don't miss next Tuesday. That's leveraging lean to address the COVID-19 challenges. And then next Thursday, the one I just mentioned about wellness strategies during the current crisis. I want to also thank our presenters today, Chris and Bill and Art. I know you've got a lot of things to do, and taking time out to resource our organization means a whole lot. And thank you for those materials. If you have materials for the participants that you feel that have worked really well for you, if you'd send those into Rob and Rana, we may be able to make those available in our construction and crisis special report. Also, Palmer posted the link, and Greg will also make that link available in the end of day email that will go out again with these bios, with all the slide deck. And if you want a recording of this event, you missed some of it, let Greg Palmer know. We'll be glad to get it to you. On behalf of the entire CURT organization, I wish you the very best. Take care of yourself and each other. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Greg.